Closer and closer to the end of this study of Hebrews together, but now we come to Hebrews chapter 12 and 13. We're just looking at a couple verses this morning. And as you're finding that, I decided today I want to find out who is the real football fan in here. Okay? Who has an app on their phone or computer or something like that tells you exactly how long till kickoff? Anybody willing to admit that? All right, how many days till kickoff? It was yesterday, okay. All right, official kickoff. I know yesterday had a game, I think, and the main games are starting up this weekend. And of course, when we get into football season, everybody's starting to pull for their favorite teams. And I did find that Baylor and Alabama have a common foe. All right, we really do. Okay, now you all know I'm a Baylor fan. I graduated from Baylor University. Susan graduated twice from Baylor University. And so we have our roots there, and so we still root for our Baylor Bears. I know many of you all in here root for Alabama. And we do have a common thing. I know a few heads are shaking, but there's a few Alabama fans here looking forward to that. We do have a common foe, and that common foe happens to be Texas A&M. And the reason for that is because Baylor almost once beat them, and so that became a foe because we almost beat them once, and because they actually did beat Alabama once. And so we have that common tie here between Texas A&M and Baylor University. Now, I'm not a big fan of A&M. Now, Susan's brother, her older brother, and his two sons have all gone to A&M. His sister-in-law went to A&M, so they're big, huge Texas A&M fans. I was never a big Texas A&M fan at all because we couldn't beat them when we really wanted to. But I will say this, Texas A&M has some great traditions. All right, it's a military-based school, and so they have some great traditions and things that they do. One of their traditions, and if you've ever seen the stadium, whether on TV or in person, you know that it's called the 12th man is one of their big traditions. They stand during the entire game, and that comes from a football game way back in 1922. All right, A&M was losing a football game. Not only were they losing the football game, but they were losing players, and they got so desperate for players that their coach, Dana Bible, was at the point where he just needed somebody to suit up and somebody to be ready to play just in case he lost another player. And at that time, you remember during the middle of the game, he had a guy that was actually on the team but had never played and was in the stands. And so he called him out of the stands. He actually put on the uniform of another player that had already been injured, and he stayed on the sidelines for that game. He didn't get into that game, but he was there and he was ready. The name of that man was E. King Gill. And in 1922, he suited up and he was ready to play for the football team. And because of that, out of that grew the 12th man tradition at Texas A&M. Throughout the entire game, the student section at A&M will stand during the game in honor of that. And it's in 1983, I think it was Jackie Sherrill, actually put together, their kickoff team was entirely made up of walk-ons. All right, they weren't scholarship players at all. These were all guys that just walked on to the football team, and that made it their team. And they were one of the best kickoff teams in the nation in college football, and it was all walk-ons. Okay, it was all just people that volunteered, guys that came out, basically out of the stands. They would practice and they would play. In 1990, the tradition was changed to becoming just one man. He wears the number 12 on his uniform, and he plays on the kickoff team. But it's a walk-on that comes onto the field, and he represents all those walk-ons on the team. And so he's actually in the game. All right, he actually plays in the game. And so it's not just fans, okay? It's not just the fans in the stands, but it is actually guys that will come off out of the stands, and they will actually play in the football game for Texas A&M. Now again, I don't like A&M a whole lot, but I like that tradition. I like that mentality of that they're ready, they're standing there, they're ready to get in, they're ready to play, they're ready to do whatever it takes, and they are there standing for their team, not only in the stands rooting them on, but saying, we're willing to get on the field with you and do what you do. Now, I think about that because when we come to Hebrews chapter 12, Chris read the verses just a few moments ago, we come to that passage of Scripture that says we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, okay? This great cloud of believers. what we looked at last week in Hebrews chapter 11, that great faith chapter of individuals, men and women, who were willing to and actually were in the game. All right? They actually got off the sidelines, and all those individuals you read about there, some named, many that aren't named, in Hebrews chapter 12, chapter 11, that were in the game, fighting the fight, running the race, doing what was needed to do, and now the writer of Hebrews says they're up there in the stands, they're cheering us on, encouraging us to do what we're called to do. Now that word for witness, depending on the translation of the Bible you have, most of your Bibles translate a great cloud of witnesses. That Greek word is actually where we get our word for martyr. Okay, we think of a martyr as somebody who has given their life for a cause. In particular, a Christian martyr gives their life for Christ. Okay, willingly sacrifices their very being to the cause of Christ. And so we're told here in this passage of Scripture, what we're going to focus on here this morning is this great cloud of witnesses that is spurring us on to complete our race, to do what we're called to do. And the way we do that is by fixing our eyes on Jesus Christ. Fixing our eyes on Christ, our Lord and Savior. So let's look again at these verses before us. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. We're told this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood." Now I want us to look at these verses here this morning. I want to hear what they say to us this morning, because what I want us to see is, what does it really take for us to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ? All right, what does it take for us to really hone in on Jesus Christ? The example here that Ron shared with the children this morning, if we get our eyes off Christ, obviously we're not going to be able to walk as effectively, we're not going to be able to work as efficiently as we would like to, and in all likelihood we are going to swerve off the path, and we're not going to be where we need to be. And so we've got to learn to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ and all that he is. And so I want us to see this morning, what does that take? What does it look like to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ? And we just, again, pull it straight out of the verses here. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 tells us it starts by something that you lose. Okay? You start fixing your eyes on Jesus Christ by losing something. Okay? Winning requires losing. Losing those things that are going to hold you back. Okay, losing those things are going to keep you from doing what you need to do and what you want to do. Now, the Greeks were known for losing everything in order to win. All right, the Greeks are known for the Olympics. All right, they were started way back 700 or so years before Christ was born. They lasted until they were revived again in the late 1800s. But they lasted until about almost 480. Okay, so the Olympics lasted for a long time. And one of the things, if you've done your history, if you've looked at it, is the fact that most of the Greeks back then competed naked. All right, nothing. They literally lost everything. All right, they had nothing that would hold them back. The tradition, actually, they believe it comes from either one of two places. There was a Greek runner by the name of Orysporus, that in 720 he actually was wearing a loincloth, but he was in the middle of the sprint. He lost his loincloth, and instead of stopping and picking it up, he just went on and he actually won the race. And so they believe that became a tradition. Then, all right, we'll just lose everything so you can win the race. The Spartans say, well, no, it really wasn't that. It was about the same time, about 720 BC, this happened. But Thudius, who was a Spartan, or Thudius, the historian, says there was a Spartan by the name of Agathonos, who won the long race by running with nothing on at all. Okay, so the Greeks way back then literally lost everything, okay, in order to be able to win the race. Now, athletes today, They don't run in the buff, although you know that might rank up the Olympics. You never know. I don't know if they're going to try that. But we're not advocating that. But that's what they used to do. But athletes today, they don't run with nothing on, but they do lose everything they can, don't they? I mean, you look at you go back and you look at what they were wearing back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and even 70s and 80s, and look at what they're wearing today. They realize the importance of getting rid of everything possible that might hold them back. Anything that might cause them to lose the least amount of energy, the least amount of speed in order to win the race, because races are usually run by tenths of a second, if not even quicker than that. And so the people that were reading this back 2,000 years ago, when this was written, they understood what it meant to get rid of everything so that you could possibly win the race. We understand today what it means to get rid of everything in order to possibly be able to win the race that's before us. And so what is it that the writer of Hebrews says we're supposed to lose? All right, he says, first of all, I want you to get rid of anything that hinders you. Okay, those things that are kind of holding you back. And again, I'll let you think on this. I want you to spend a second or two thinking on this. What are those things in your life that hold you back, that keep you from doing what you're called to do? And they may not necessarily be bad things, but what are those habits you have in your life that are keeping you from doing really all that God would have you to be? Are there certain relationships in your life that you have with individuals that maybe because of that relationship your Christian witness isn't as strong as it could be or should be? Because of the people you're hanging around? Are there certain practices you do on a daily basis that maybe keep you from being where you're supposed to be and doing what you're supposed to do as you try to serve Jesus Christ and live for Him? I've said oftentimes, Sunday morning worship doesn't start on Sunday morning, it starts on Saturday night. What are you doing to prepare Saturday night to get up Sunday morning so you can come and worship properly? Okay, and that has to do with anything. Same thing with Bible studies. What are you doing the night before to get ready to do a morning Bible study? Or what are you doing during the day to get ready for that evening Bible study, to spend time with God and to be with Him? What are those things? And they may not be bad things, because relationships aren't bad things. Hobbies aren't bad things. The things that you do all the time aren't necessarily bad things, but are those some things? Those things can at times turn into distractions. They can turn into things that hinder you and keep you from doing what you're called to do. What do you need to lose in your life? What do you need to change in your life in order to be more effective in your relationship with Jesus Christ and be more effective in even sharing Jesus Christ? Okay, the writer of Hebrews says, lose those things, those hindrances that hold you back and pull you down and keep you from effectively serving Jesus Christ today. Not only the hindrances, but he says, get rid of those sins that so easily entangle you. What sins are in your life that keep you from serving your Lord and Savior? Fear. Fear is a sin. Now fear, I know, is an emotion, but what you do with that, it determines what happens. Fear can become a sin when we let fear keep us from doing what we know we're supposed to do. When we're called to do and say something and we don't do it because we're afraid of what somebody might say or what somebody might do or what might happen to us, will hold us back. When you look at that list in Hebrews chapter 11, there was some great fear. It says that Moses had to overcome his fear of Pharaoh. Okay, Pharaoh was the ruler of the world at that day. Pharaoh could very easily, at least in Pharaoh's mind and everybody else's mind, take Moses' life if he chose to. And Moses had to overcome that fear of Pharaoh and the power that he had in order to faithfully serve God and do what God called him to do. And it cost him some things. So fear can become a sin when we let it stymie us, when we let it keep us from doing what we're called to do. What about anger? All right, anger is just a progression, really, of fear, and it's a progression of other things that happen in our life where we're not really trusting in God, and we're not really believing in those around us, and we get angry because we've lost control of certain things, and so we want to control, and the only way we know to control is by trying to let our anger overcome it and do things we shouldn't do. And so anger can be one of those things that hold us back. And I think at the root of all sin is this one here, pride. I've said it before, say it again. What's at the center of sin? I. What's at the center of pride? I. Me, mine, what I want, what I desire, what's good for me, what feels right for me, what I would like to see done or said. Whenever we start looking at what I want and my needs aren't getting met, and this is what I would like to do, that becomes an issue of pride because I deserve this. And again, all you have to do is listen to radio stations and the advertisement you get. You deserve this. This should be yours. You should have this. This should be within your rights. And whenever we start letting pride step in, and whenever we let pride take over, then we start sinning because it becomes about me rather than about God, rather than about serving Him. You go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. That ultimately was the last little bit that got Eve and then Adam over the edge there with Satan was, you know what, if you take this fruit, and if you eat this fruit, you won't need God anymore. You can be your own God. You'll know good and evil for yourself, and then therefore you'll be equal to God, and so therefore you'll be number one. And you won't have to trust in God. You can trust in yourself. Now, we know where that got him. It didn't get him to a very good place. That sin of pride, I think pride is at the center of all sins that we have in our lives. So the writer of Hebrews says here, throw off everything that keeps you from serving God faithfully. Throw off everything. Get rid of those hindrances, even if they're potentially good things. Get rid of them if they keep you from doing what you ought to do. Get rid of those sins that trip you up and keep you from being effective in your faith. And he says, run with perseverance. All right, run with that dogged devotion that you're going to get to where you need to be and you're going to do what you need to do. So run with perseverance and don't look back and don't let anything or anybody else hold you back. So fixing your eyes on Jesus, it starts by losing. Okay, losing those things that are going to keep you from going where you need to go. And then it continues by focusing. Okay, what Ron was illustrating here a few moments ago with the children by where is your focus? And the scripture is very clear here. He says, fix your eyes on Jesus. All right, why? Why Jesus? Why not something else? Why not, a mom or a dad that's a good example to you, or a grandmother that's a good example to you, or maybe a preacher that's a real good example to you, or maybe your favorite author that really encouraged you. Why not fix your eyes on there? Isn't that good enough? Why not Paul, okay? Paul even says, imitate me, but he never leaves it there. He says, imitate me as I imitate Christ, because he was always pointing people to Christ. But we can fix our eyes in a lot of different places, and it's good to have role models. It's good to have people that will push us in the right direction, but we need something more than that. And so the author of Hebrews says here, fix your eyes on Jesus. He's just listed a bunch of people there in Hebrews chapter 11 that are good role models, but he says that's not good enough. Fix your eyes on Jesus. And why Jesus? First of all, because of who he is. All right, now think about it. All right, I know the high school football season kicked off this weekend. College football season, a couple games have been played, and more will be played this week. And official kickoff will be this weekend coming up. Coaches are in the mode of motivating their players, and they'll do that throughout the whole season. And oftentimes what they'll do is, to motivate their players, they'll bring in somebody from the past, right? They'll bring in somebody that was an all-star, maybe a player or maybe a coach, and they'll bring that player or that coach into the room with those guys, and they'll say, this is somebody who played, this is somebody that did a great job, this is somebody that is in the Hall of Fame, whatever it might be, whatever Hall of Fame that might be. They bring them in, and they use that person to try to motivate and encourage the players to go. But there's one thing about that. Those people may be able to encourage those players, but they can't actually compete for them. Okay, they may be able to inspire those players, but they can't actually physically give them strength. They may be able to motivate those players, but they can't actually get down there on the field and play for them, okay? Somebody else has to get down there and do that, and that's who Jesus Christ is, okay? We fix our eyes on Jesus Christ because he is the only one that is unique in all of these people that actually comes in flesh. God himself comes in flesh, is incarnate, and takes on flesh, and then he lives the life for us, and he can actually come within us, fill us, and drive us on, unlike anybody else, unlike anything else. So first of all, who he is. All right? Who is he? We're told here. He's the author of our faith. Now that Greek word for author, actually one of the meanings of that word is a trailblazer. Okay? He is somebody that has marked out the path for us. Okay, that's what a trailblazer would do. They'd send people ahead and they would mark a trail. Okay, they'd get rid of some of the obstacles. They'd make it to where you knew which way to go. This is a safe place to go. This is a safe place to climb. This is a safe place to cross a river, whatever it might be. But a trailblazer would go ahead of everybody else, and they would set the path for those that were going to follow behind them. They would also set the tone for the people that were going to follow behind them. Okay, this is where you need to go. This is how you need to go. This is where you can stop. This is where you can keep going strong. Whatever. All those kinds of things. That's what Jesus Christ does for us as the author of our faith. Okay, He set the tone for us. Okay, He showed us what to do here. We'll get to that here in just a second. But He also marked the path for us. Says, this is how you do it. All right, Philippians chapter 2. Paul writes to the church there in Philippi. He says, if you've got any encouragement, any love, anything at all from Jesus Christ, imitate Him. Okay? He didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but He made Himself into the form of a servant, okay? Not just in the form of a man, but not just a man, but a servant. Not only just a servant, but somebody who's willing to die, not for His sins, but for the sins of the world. He sets the tone. He sets the path for us. He says, this is what it takes to have real faith. So we look to Jesus because of who He is, because He's the trailblazer. He's the author of our faith. But not only that, He's also the perfecter of our faith. Okay? He lives in us to bring to completion what we can't do ourselves. Okay? He's the only one that can do it. Okay? He is the only one that is without defect or blemish, is what we're told here in Scripture. Now who here is without defect or blemish in your life? All right, who here is without sin? I'm not holding my hand because I count that. I'm just giving an example. If anybody... Not one of us here is without defect or sin, are we? Go back and look at Hebrews chapter 11. All those great men and women that were listed in that text there. Which one of those was without defect or blemish? Which one of those was without sin? As you read through the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, all the way through the Old Testament, every single one of those individuals, they had defects. Okay, they had faults. They didn't live consistently all the time in their life. They fell short. Okay, not one of them was perfect. Now they can serve as examples. They can serve as people that were faithful, and they can serve as people that did trust in God, but not one of them was perfect. Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone lived the perfect, sinless life. And because He lived that perfect, sinless life, what Scripture teaches us and what we know to be true when you accept Him as your Lord and Savior, then therefore He is the one that perfects you. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But when Christ comes and lives in us, don't miss this point. Don't miss what the author is trying to help us to understand here. When Christ comes into us, He perfects us before the Father. He makes us worthy. Not because of what I have done or what you have done, but because of what He has done. Now, this doesn't imply that we're not involved in the process. And I think Hebrews is very clear about that we have a role in the process. And I'll never understand the mentality of people that say, well, you know what, I'm just going to trust in Jesus, I'm going to live like I want to live. That I have no role in the process. Because you read throughout Scripture, you see that we do have a role in this process. We have a role of faith and belief and trust and living a righteous life and a good life. But it's not my righteousness, it's not my goodness, it's not what I do that ultimately saves me. It is Christ's perfection in me that ultimately saves me. And when I get that right, when I understand that right, then I can truly live for Him as I ought to. When I'm trying to do the work, it does me no good. And when I trust in Him to do the work, then what I do can be beneficial. And so we see who Jesus Christ is. He is the trailblazer for our faith. He sets the tone. He is actually the author of our faith, and He's also the perfecter of our faith. Him living in us Makes us what we could never be on our own. So that's one reason to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ, because of who He is. The second reason is because of what He did. Look there in the text again. What does it say there in verse 2? It says that He endured the cross. Okay, He persevered through the cross for us 3 times. Okay, and if a word shows up 3 times in 3 verses, it's probably a pretty important word. Okay, it's a pretty important concept that the writer's trying to get across here. In verse 1, we're told to persevere. Okay, and that's actually the same root word for enduring. Okay, so we're called to endure the race that's set before us. Okay, the way we do that is by being encouraged by those great men and women of Hebrews chapter 11, but ultimately by putting our trust in Jesus Christ. And because Jesus Christ was willing to endure the cross and the shame of the cross. And then in verse 3, you're going to come across the word again. It says, consider Him who endured, consider Christ who endured the cross, so that you won't grow weary. So obviously the writer wants us to understand that enduring the cross is a pretty important thing, isn't it? Christ endured the cross. And look at what we're told here about what He endured. Okay, Christ endured the shame of the cross. And again, at the root of what we're being told there is He actually looked with contempt and disdain on what the cross meant. Now think about it. Christ, who lived a perfect life, who came to seek and to save those that were lost, who didn't grasp equality with God, didn't grasp that, but was willing to give that up on benefit of all of humanity, had all these people that were just looking for Him, waiting for Him to stumble, were looking for Him and waiting for Him to mess up. We're trying to find ways to trap Him in His words and trying to trap Him in His actions, and we're doing everything they possibly could to somehow discredit Jesus Christ. And say, aha, you're really not who you say you are, and you're really not this great loving God, you're not really this great wonderful person, but you're somebody who is just like us and somebody that's actually worse than us. And so where does Jesus Christ end up? He ends up on the cross, the most humiliating form of death, the most excruciating form of death, the kind of death that was reserved for the worst of the worst. And so imagine what all those people are doing that are finally saying, you know what, we want to discredit Jesus Christ as much as we possibly can. Those that had Him on the cross, obviously when you read the examples of it, the stories of it, as He's on the cross, are mocking Him, shaming Him, telling Him to come down and save Himself, finally saying to themselves, look, He's really not this great. He's less than us. We're bigger, we're better, we're stronger. The shame of the cross. Jesus knew what they were thinking. Jesus knew what was going on in their minds. Jesus understood the mocking and the shame and all that went through, and yet He went through that. He endured that shame, that disgrace. It was not deserved. So He could bring life. Because He knew there was something better on the other side. He knew there was something beyond the cross. So that was good. Now that's the example He leaves for us. There's something better than what we have right here. As good as it may get in this life, there's something better than what we get in this life. As bad as it gets in this life, as horrible as it may get in this life, there's something better. There's a joy set before us if we trust in God and trust in Jesus Christ our Lord and Savior. If we do that, that there's something better beyond it. So Jesus Christ set the tone for us. He endured the cross. He endured the shame of the cross, what He didn't deserve, what really you and I deserve. He endured that so that we can have life. Because He knew there was something better beyond the suffering that He faced there. So fix your eyes on Jesus because of who He is. Fix your eyes on Jesus because of what He did. And then thirdly, the author tells us to fix our eyes on Jesus because of where He is. Jesus endured the cross. And then we're told that He sat at the right hand of God, on the throne of God. All right, well, what that says, again, and Him being seated doesn't mean He's no longer active. Okay, Jesus isn't up in heaven, He's kind of looking down and saying, I hope everything's okay. We know that Christ is living and active. What that means, what it means to be seated at that in that position, is it's a place of honor, it's a place of authority, and it's a place of power. And so Jesus endured the cross. He did what he was called to do, and now he is in that place of honor and power and authority. What he had before the incarnation, he had again after his death and resurrection. And he says that is where he is today. And the author says that's why we can look to Jesus. That's why we don't look to anybody else, even though they may give us some motivation, they may give us some encouragement, what he did there in Hebrews chapter 11. But he says, ultimately, fix your eyes on Jesus. Because of who he is, because of what he did, because of where he is today. That's why we look to Jesus Christ. Now tonight I'll be preaching the final sermon I have on living a Christian life in an upside down world. And I'm focusing on Christ alone. Well, why do we look at Christ and only Christ? Why don't we look at a bunch of other people or a bunch of other things? So why does our world say we ought to be looking in a lot of different directions? Well, we look at Jesus Christ and Christ alone because of who he is, the author and perfecter of our faith. Because of what he did, he endured the shame of the cross, the disgrace of the cross, so that we can have life. Because of where he is. He is in heaven, on the throne, in a position of power and authority over all things, and is still actively working and doing those kinds of things. So you start by losing. Okay, get rid of those things in your life. What are they? That keep you from living effectively for Jesus Christ. What is it that keeps you from putting your trust in him maybe for the first time? And if you put your faith and trust in him, what is it that is now holding you back? What is Satan let creep into your life that holds you back from serving him? What are those sins? What are those issues of pride that you have in your life that are keeping you from being effective in serving him? Continue by making sure you're looking at Jesus Christ and who he is. Then finally, we're told that we go until we reach the finish line. All right, we go until we finally get to the end. We go until Christ says, this is it, this is the end, this is the ultimately where you end up. Okay? And again, the readers 2,000 years ago would have understood this. Okay? They understood the Olympic Games. They understood maybe primarily the running games were a big part of the event. And actually, we get our word stadium. Comes from a Greek word. Basically, a stadium was about 600 feet. So in the Greek world, for those shorter runs, those 600-yard runs or 600 feet long runs, they would build a stadium. Okay, it was an oblong area, very similar looking to some of our football fields today. Okay, they would build this big long stadium. They'd have stands on the side. They'd have an entrance for the athletes to come in. They'd have the other end where the finish line was. And what they would do was the spectators would sit all on the side, just like we do in a football game or a baseball game or something like that today. They would sit on the sides of it. They'd be watching the race. And at the end, what you'd have is you'd have a judge there that had the prize. And what you'd have is you'd have 3 markers. Okay, one column marking this is the starting point, one column marking this is the finish line, then he also had one mark in the middle at the midpoint line. What the runners would focus on was not the starting line, not the midline, and not even really the finish line. What they would focus on is they would focus on the judge after the finish line and make sure that they got there, because he's the one that had the prize for them. Okay, he's the one that had that laurel wreath. Whoever came in first, he is the one that held that prize for him. And so they made sure they fixed their eyes on him. And they didn't stop, at the midpoint. They didn't stop at the finish line. They got to the judge. They made it to the end. Several months ago now, I think it was back in February, Danny and I went down to St. Augustine. Looking at one of the OT schools, actually where she ended up, University of St. Augustine. And we got in there, they had all these possible applicants and everything else in the room. They were talking about OT and PT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, potential students, and they hadn't been, all of them, they were going to get in yet or anything. But so they brought in people, they were encouraging them, telling them about the school, but then they brought in, I think it was, can't remember who it was, I didn't write his name down, it was either the president of the university or one of the deans over that program. And he came in, and what stuck in my mind was what he talked about. He said he talked about the psyche of making it to the end. Because what he was talking to him about, he says, this program's going to be hard. Whether you're occupational therapy or physical therapy, it's a demanding program, okay? This is not high school. It's definitely not college, okay? This is graduate school, and we're going to expect a lot from you, and it's going to get hard. There's going to be times that you want to quit. There's going to be times you think you just can't go any farther. And the analogy that he used was of runners in a race, no matter what kind of race it may be, whether it's a 100-yard dash or 100-meter dash, or whether it be an actual marathon, the psyche that goes into somebody that is focused on winning that race. And I'm sure you've seen things like this before, where especially like in an Olympic type event or maybe a triathlon type event, you get those runners and they are just, they're almost to the finish line, okay? They're almost up to that finish line and they're hardly moving at all, okay? They can't hardly take a step, and, they're barely being able to do whatever they can do, but yet they make it to that finish line, and as soon as they cross that finish line, what do? They just collapse after the finish line. Now, what if that finish line had been 10 yards farther? Would they have made it 10 yards farther? Yeah, they would have made it another 10 yards because they were going to make it to that finish line. Because they were driven to make it to that finish line. If that finish line had been another 100 yards, they would have made it to that yard line because that's where they were going to go. That was what their goal was. And that's the mentality that we have to have here, and that's the mentality that we're being encouraged to have here in these verses, is that you go until you reach the finish line. You go until you have nothing else to give. You go until Jesus Christ says, here's the crown, here's the victory, you have won. So there's no quitting, there's no giving up, there's no retirement in the Christian life and the Christian faith in this life. There's no, I've done my job, and now it's somebody else's job. Unless you're going to take another job. One of the greatest examples I heard of this, I was at Stanford University at a pastor school. This was probably about 10, 12 years ago now, no longer than that probably. But they were talking about, Mr. Beeson was one that gave a lot of money to the school and gave a lot to the Stanford University for the chapel and all that. And they had a big, I always thought it was kind of awkward a little bit. They had this, kind of, I don't know if it wasn't a bust, but it was an image of him at the floor. Okay, those of you that have been to the chapel there, you've seen it before. And it's like, do I walk over it, around it? I don't want to step on it. It's a little weird to me that they put, but it was in recognition of what he had done for the school and all that. And it was actually one of his, I think, some kind of relative, a nephew or something along those lines. This gentleman was in his 80s. And they brought him up there, and they were talking about him and the relationship he had to Mr. Beeson and all those kinds of things. And then they said, yeah, and he's a faithful servant in this church. And they said he just took on a new ministry. Okay, this is an 80-year-old man. He just took on a new ministry at his church, and they're really building it up. He is the new children's minister at their church. At 80 years old. How many times do we say, I've been there, done that, that's not my job, that's somebody else's job? Well, that's okay if you're taking a new job. There's no retirement in the Christian life. There's no retirement from ministry. There's no retirement of quitting and saying, you know what, I'm just going to sit back and wait till glory and just kind of recline back and do nothing. We're called to go until the finish line. Okay, when we focus our eyes on Jesus Christ, we don't stop at the midway point and say that's good enough. We don't stop at the finish line and say, whatever we think that might be, that's good enough. No, we keep going until we reach the end, until we get to the point where Jesus Christ says, well done, good and faithful service, come home and be with me. That's what it means to fix our eyes on Jesus Christ. Paul put it this way when he wrote to Timothy, 2 Timothy, probably the last letter that he wrote, definitely the last letter that he wrote to Timothy, basically his last will and testament. In chapter 4, verses 7 and 8, Paul says this. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And listen to the hope he gives here to Timothy. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. You know who's in that all? I'm in that all. Not because I'm a great, wonderful person, not because I deserve it, because I put my trust in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. If you put your hope and trust in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're part of that all. Okay? And we ought to be like Paul. That's what Paul was doing to Timothy here. He was saying, Timothy, keep on going, keep working hard. He says, I know my life is about to end. He says, I know that this is finally going to be it, that I'm about to be executed. And so my life is just about over. And Paul was still running his race, even at this point, because he was still encouraging others, and he was still trying to do all that he could. But he knew that his life was about to end on this earth, and he was going to get his crown of righteousness. He says, yours is waiting there for you too. Keep going. Fix your eyes on Jesus Christ. He is the author and perfecter of your faith. He is the one that endured the shame of the cross so that you could have hope and you could have life. Fix your eyes on Him and serve Him. I think it was last September. We watched the movie here at the church, The Insanity of God. It was the documentary, it wasn't really, it was a movie documentary. It was done by primarily Nick Ripken, but Nick and Ruth Ripken, who are IMB missionaries. Some of y'all saw that. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch that movie. It's a very powerful, moving film. It's about modern-day martyrs. It's about people that are today living their life for Jesus Christ and serving Him despite a lot of difficulties. And at the heart of this movie, it talks about their own personal loss. Okay, they lost a son while on the mission field. Okay, due to an asthma attack, and actually physically he died. They had to lose him. They decided, do we keep going or do we not keep going? And part of that journey was him looking at and going and talking to these other people of stories of their faith and what kept them going and how they kept serving, and then people that were still currently serving and what kept them going. And it kind of ends with this story of, I believe the man was in Afghanistan, this big, brawny, used to be an ex-military kind of guy that had come to faith in Jesus Christ, and he was trying to decide, do I keep doing this or not? It might harm my family. There's a potential that, not only can I maybe be physically harmed, but my family might be physically harmed. And he had to keep asking the question, is it worth it? The question at the heart of this movie for the Ripkins, for all those believers in all those other countries, and for this man that was in Afghanistan, they had to keep asking themselves this question, is Jesus worth it? Is it worth it to fix my eyes on Jesus Christ? Live the way He lived. Put my trust in Him. Deny the things that around me that maybe bring me pleasure and temporarily make me feel good. Am I willing to get rid of those things that hinder me from looking at Him? Am I really willing to get rid of those things in my life that keep me from effectively serving Him? Is it worth it to follow Jesus? Nick Ripken in his movie. The answer is yes. Yes. Yes, it is worth it to put my trust in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Now those men and women in Hebrews, even though they didn't know the name of Jesus, they would say, yes, it was worth it to look to a country beyond this country, to look to a life beyond this life, and put my trust in Jesus Christ. To those that Nick Ripken interviewed and heard about, they would say, yes, it was worth it to put my focus and fix my gaze on Jesus Christ. What about you today? Will you fix your eyes truly on Jesus Christ? Will you get rid of those things that hinder you? The sin that so easily entangles you? Will you change your patterns in your life and your lifestyle? Will you do things in your life so that you can fix your eyes on Jesus and Jesus alone? Because the great thing about fixing your eyes on Jesus, it's not that you don't care about anybody else or anything else around you. You actually care more about the people and the things around you. Because when you don't have your eyes fixed on Jesus, ultimately they're fixed on you. So He says, fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Trust in Him to do a mighty work in your life. If you fixed your eyes on Jesus today, if you would please stand. come to our invitation. That's my invitation to you is, are you willing to fix your eyes on Jesus today? Let His Spirit touch your spirit today and ask yourself, what is it that's holding me back? What am I holding on to? What am I not willing to lose? Slowing me down. Am I willing to lose that? For Jesus Christ? Will I really fix my eyes on Him and Him alone today? My Lord and Savior. It's my only hope. Let's fix our eyes on Him today. The invitation is for you to do that. Father, I come before you and I thank you for your word. I thank you for the great cloud of witnesses that point us in the right direction. We don't look to them, but we look to the same place they're looking, and that is to you. Pray, Father, that today we will fix our eyes on you and you alone. Father, what powerful things can happen if and when we'll do that. I ask for your grace, your mercy, and your power to enable us to do that very thing in our lives. That it begin with me, and that it continue with all those here that will follow your will today. In Christ's name that I pray.